And welcome back to Punchline. Let's deal with a little bit of politics. Will Raila Odinga, your party leader, run for the presidency in 2022? Or for the top seat, I should say?
Well, from his perspective, he is better placed to answer that question. From my perspective, I've been saying it persistently, that he should run, and it's good for the reform movement that he runs.
Why? What difference? What different candidature would he offer after these several stabs that he's had?
No, I'm just saying that, you know, if you look at the governments we've had through over the years, we have not had a leadership that really is determined to implement the reforms that you know, people have undertaken or people have been promised by the various parties or political movements. I think in order to have two reforms, you need a reformer. And in the political field at the moment, I think he's better placed as a reform candidate to engineer and bring about these changes if he runs.
Okay. You know, we've seen the differences that have emerged in Jubilee, and you've alluded to them when you talked about the relationship between the deputy president and the president. Is it your view that government as is currently constituted is so fractured that it is not capable of performing in the remaining years of this administration?
I think it'd be difficult, and that's why we are saying the deputy president should have held the president in his agenda, like, you know, the Big Four agenda. I mean,
is that going to happen?
I mean, it's lost. Who talks about the Big Four agenda?
It's gone.
It's like gone. And even the resources for it, you needed somebody who has a team that is focused on those four big agenda and determine who are going to be the players, what are the countries going to do.
Should the president dismantle his cabinet and appoint people who are like-minded, handshake-like people?
Well, I think it'd be difficult for him to do that because of the umbilical cord that ties him with the deputy president. And even if he had to appoint a different sets of members of cabinet, you know, the deputy president will still affect or have an impact on what's going on in government.
You think the deputy president is a liability to the president then?
I think to the extent that he cannot implement his Big Four agenda and other reform commitments that they have made to the Kenyan people, I think he needs to rethink his position. And I've seen from history, you know, in Tanzania and many other places when we had strong people around the presidency, even somebody as liberal as Nyerere, you know, they kind of, you know, were outed because of their strong positions, the Malechelas, the Kawawas. Here we had Jaramogi and Kenyatta. I think it's in the nature of the presidency that a deputy should be a deputy, not another center of power.
Okay. You've called on for Kenya to adopt a parliamentary system of government. When you look at what's happening the world over, the UK, Israel, do you believe that parliamentary systems are really stable? And can Kenya afford every so often to have a change in party leadership, in government policy?
Look at the world generally. I mean, if you start from Japan to Australia, to New Zealand, to the Indian subcontinent, be it India, be it Bangladesh, although Bangladesh may not be a good example, and go to Europe. Essentially, most of Europe is parliamentary systems. You go to Canada, you go to the Caribbean countries. Look at what's happening to Southern America with imperial, you know, presidencies. You know, it's not a good record, and therefore, if you want inclusivity, especially in complicated kind of societies like we have, I think it is easier to have an inclusive system with a parliamentary system of government. Because the presidency, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, power still tends to be concentrated in an office and the office of the presidency. In a parliamentary system, because you are subject to parliament, you rule from parliament, seek authority from parliament all the time, it's easier to check and balance in terms of inclusivity. Then also, to have an imperial presidency grow is not easy in a parliamentary system. Look at South Africa. Whenever they wanted, even the political party, to withdraw one of their own as president, it has been possible. Ethiopia is also essentially, a parliamentary system, although it's more of a authoritarian system.
But where do you get stability with that in a complicated country like ours, where views tend to be polar opposites? The possibility of frequent change in government, where we've known changes like that completely destroy our economy. I mean, is that?
I think it makes it more dynamic. Those frequent changes, so long as they can be, there's a mechanism, for dealing with those frequent changes.
Like?
Like, for example, if you lost a majority in parliament, one should be able to accept it. It's not like, I remember one time in Lesotho when a prime minister lost an election and he refused to relinquish power. Of course, that didn't work out very well. But if that mechanism is allowed to operate, then I think a parliamentary system is more inclusive. You remember there was a time when both Kenyatta and Ngala in parliament, they had co-equal positions in parliament, although from different political parties. So in a presidential system, it's very difficult to achieve that.
Okay.
You had Nigeria at independence, it was basically a parliamentary system. When it was destroyed, Nigeria never had peace.
Okay. I want you to look back a little bit, and let's go back to one of our most contentious periods in recent history, October 26th, 2017. Yeah. Do you now fully accept the validity of that election and that Uhuru Kenyatta is the legitimate president of Kenya?
You can accept legitimacy in the sense that factually, de facto, is the one sitting in the State House. You are dealing with a legal situation as it is and a factual situation, but when you deal with it from a constitutional point of view, then you'll have problems. So, in terms of legitimacy and in terms of the facts on the ground, we have accepted Uhuru Kenyatta as the president of the Republic of Kenya. That is not to say that the processes that led to him coming into office were lawful and constitutional. I think that's quite a different question.
And part of the 9-point agenda of the handshake was electoral justice.
Electoral justice.
So by your statement and that kind of acceptance of facts, for instance, to a process that you regarded to be flawed and have still stated was flawed, doesn't that undermine the agenda to begin with?
It doesn't undermine, because I think we have become pragmatic and we are realists, that in order to deal with the situation as it is objectively, you have to start from somewhere. If we still were in a position where we are still contending his legitimacy, then addressing these same constitutional questions would be extremely difficult.
So this is a question of pragmatism.
Yeah, and I think I can compare it again with South Africa, where the ANC was fighting against the Nationalist Party, but it came to a situation where they recognized the Nationalist Party as the regime that was in place, and therefore they negotiated with it.
Okay. On October 15, 2017, you said, quote, you had reasonable grounds to believe that two state officers, CS Fred Matiang'i and the Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boynet, were, quote, criminally responsible for crimes against humanity that were at the time being systematically meted out on NASA supporters and their leaders in the name of preserving public order. Do you still hold that to be true?
I still hold it in terms of the fact that under international humanitarian law, it is not the person who pulls the trigger. It is the person who is in control and directing, the regime or the government in place at the time. So we had many.
So President Kenyatta in that case?
They take responsibility to the extent to which they were they were wielding executive authority. And to that extent, and there are cases in court by families. We may not be talking about it as loudly as we should, but the fact that there was an injustice and a denial of human rights and killings, that will never go away.
Crimes against humanity, those go to the ICC?
No. They don't go to ICC, all of them. They only go there when we are unable to deal with them, or where the state doesn't have the instruments and institutions.
Let me put it this way. You are saying that President Uhuru Kenyatta, the Cabinet Secretary for the Interior, Fred Matiang'i, and the then Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boynet, still do remain criminally responsible, I beg your pardon, for crimes against humanity that were meted out on NASA supporters during the 2017 elections.
That one they cannot run away with, and under the
your answer is yes.
Under the Constitution of Kenya, there is no immunity insofar as any office in the land is concerned when it comes to international crimes.
Why are you then not, pushing for all three to face the law? How then can you sit in a handshake with a man who you believe has perpetuated crimes against humanity on your own supporters?
Look at the position in Sudan. Sudan, where the president who was ousted was being summoned by the International Criminal Court for many years. After a little while, even the United States of America has reached a situation where they thought they could be talking to that regime despite, those crimes that had been committed and had not been dealt with. So I think I go back to my initial point that when you have an objective situation that can resolve historical injustices, I think the cue is better taken and the problem dealt at a political level, because sometimes the tools of criminal justice may not necessarily resolve the bigger questions of the day. So you may resort...
Isn't this a betrayal of your supporters?
No, it's not a betrayal.
Of those who lost life, property then?
It's not a betrayal if there were no ways of dealing with those crimes. And I'm saying there are ways of dealing with those crimes, and some of those cases are in court.
So you're saying you're satisfied with the action that is being taken to bring restitution to the victims of violence in that election?
Yes, but I think both sides, and if you read that memorandum that Uhuru and Raila signed, there was, they addressed that question. And they said, out of this initiative of theirs, they will come out with answers of how to address that question.
What do you think the answers to that should be?
I really don't know what the answers would be, but I think at a political level, first of all, I think there should be an apology and taking political responsibility.
From President Kenyatta?
From the government, let me put it that way, because I don't think if you personalize it, you make it any better.
Who should apologize? The government spokesperson?
But you have seen Japan apologizing to Korea for crimes committed during the Second World War.
Who should apologize?
I'm saying the government of President Uhuru Kenyatta should apologize.
Do you think it would be right for President Uhuru Kenyatta to apologize himself? I mean, he's issued apologies before, TJRC, I believe.
Yeah, I think in one of the statements he made in Parliament, went to the extent of saying, I'm sorry for what happened. I think even me, I really appreciated, you know, that speech, because he did say, I've wronged some people also have wronged me.
He equally commended police officers for their action at the time?
Well, when you're head of state, sometimes you put in a situation where if you abandon the people who protect you, essentially.
This handshake has really gagged you, hasn't it? You seem to be having quite a degree of difficulty in saying what James Orengo a few years ago would have said outright. Uhuru Kenyatta, you owe us an apology.
I've told you about international crimes and those who are responsible. Is that not me talking? Would somebody tell you the same?
You said the government. Which office of government?
Yeah, but I told you.
Government has
thousands of offices. Your question was, should Matiang'i take responsibility?
And your answer is
should
yes.
The president take responsibility?
Your answer is yes.
My answer was yes.
Okay. On this show, one of the NASA principals, Musalia Mudavadi, admitted that NASA has not delivered on its promise to secure justice for those supporters. And according to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, up to 70 people were killed. Still on this program, Musalia said that he did not know what became of the now infamous NASA pay bill, which was meant to collect funds to cater for the victims of electoral violence. Would you admit that there has been some failure on the part of NASA?
Well, you know, Musalia Mudavadi is my friend, and I respect the man in every way. But you remember we had fundraisers, we had service for those who died. I don't remember him turning up. Yeah, just the same way they can't explain why they were not there when Raila was being sworn in as a people's president. I think it's easy to say some of these things, but I think what is wrong with a lot of political leaders is that the pursuit of political power becomes an end in itself. So I would put a lot of politicians in that category. I don't know, I'm not sure I'm in that category. I'm not in that category.
Including Musalia.
But I'm saying nearly all of them.
Including Musalia. By such statements.
By such, you know, because all of them are looking at 2022. But the issue of reform, you know, look at the history of our country. At any time when we have been out there, when the Wangari Maathais have been out there, people are talking climate change. Wangari Maathai was fighting, you know, for environment, conservation. We were at Karura. Never hear of these people. When we are...
So Musalia Mudavadi should be quiet, in other words.
When we are fighting for...
That's what you're saying.
Multi-party. I'm not addressing Musalia Mudavadi necessarily.
You're saying he wasn't there,
I'm addressing the political class. Yeah, that, you know, they are safer and happier and noisier when we are fighting about political power. You know, they like easy targets, like 2022. But these complications about good governance, this is just rhetoric for them. But good governance sometimes takes even little people. You know, that little child from Sweden is making the world, you know, go to the streets in millions all over the world.
And Musalia couldn't attend a vigil. What you have said on this program. All right, but just to clarify, what became of that pay bill exactly? How much was raised? How was this money used?
Well, if you look at the accounts, the NASA and the party ODM use every coin to go towards funeral expenses.
Hasn't been made public.
And giving people you know, contributions, and even members of NASA included gave personal contributions. And to that extent, I really appreciate people like Pasaris. You know, she managed part of that account, and I'm very happy to have engaged her with Mudama, you know. She was running around looking for money.
How much was raised?
I think it was something about 5-6 million shillings.
5-6 million.
Yeah.
Are you prepared to, because this has been such a subject of contention, what happened to the money? Was it actually used? Do you think it's time to make those accounts public and show how it was used?
I think they are valuable. They are valuable if somebody wants to accounts to be given. I think between me, Senator Mudama, and Esther Passaris, whom I must, congratulate in this, because she was at the mortuaries, she was with the families, and giving us an account of what is required when we were going to, to the where people were living and where these events took place.
Right.
Some of them came with us.
Okay. Why has ODM seemingly gone slow on demands for electoral reform right now? Is that strategic? Are you waiting on BBI?
I think yes, we are waiting, but we have our own positions that we have put before, and I think we don't want to be repeating these things because they're already in the public domain. Like on the issues of electoral justice, if you look at the bill that we came out with as Okoa Kenya, there was a whole chapter dealing with electoral justice and questions for the referendum, including how to form and establish the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission.
That's true, but I'm just saying that we don't hear that now, especially now when you seem to have the ear of government to be co-running it, as you have said. Yes. One would imagine that this is the time when you would find consensus building quite easy and would be, quite loud and assertive about this.
Yeah, but it is for good measure that we are not loud. I think what should be heard now is what the people of Kenya are saying.
Okay, so
and if you followed what the committee was doing in the towns they went to, because they went to every county, there were lots of suggestions on these areas. And for that, I think it would be wrong for ODM to be saying it's either a way or
the highway.
Or the highway.
Why has NASA seemingly abandoned Miguna Miguna?
I don't think we have abandoned Miguna Miguna. If you go to the case that was prosecuted on his behalf in court, they were essentially NASA lawyers, me being one of them. I went up, I led the team up to the Court of Appeal, before Justice Chacha, before a panel of 3 judges in the Court of Appeal. Yeah. When he was stuck at the airport, we were all there. But I think at the moment is...
that he's always online.
Yeah, he's
castigating you, saying you have all abandoned him.
Yes.
You secured a decision from the courts and are not pushing for its implementation.
Yeah, you see, for example, all of us, quite a number of us have been in exile. Yeah. The Kogi Wamwere, there was Chalagat Mutai, Makao Mutua, Anyang Nyong'o, Kiraitu Murungi. Everybody has been in exile. And
are you saying it's his turn? Are you saying it's his turn?
I'm not saying it's his turn. In fact, he was in exile at the time when lots of us were in exile. I'm not saying me particularly, but lots of other people were in exile. But I think we should come out of the mood of lamentations and fight it out. So I think we should fight it out in the courts. I think Miguna has every right to demand that he should be allowed to come back to Kenya.
How do you intend to stand with him in that respect?
Not just allowed to come back to Kenya. I think he should still make attempts to come back to Kenya, because the law... Hear what I'm saying?
I'm listening to you.
Yes.
But it sounds like you're sending him on a mission that is mission impossible.
No, it's
because
not.
He's tried it before. And isn't it more practical that now that you're in that agreement with President Kenyatta, that the coalition formally press this administration to do the right thing, to abide by court orders? Other than telling me, which is what it sounds like you're saying. You just board a flight and let's see what will happen.
Governments have many ways they work. Like for example, you've had this ongoing thing about President Trump and the president of Ukraine, and in diplomatic language and rhetoric, the truth is somewhere there in the middle. When we're talking about Miguna to Uhuru's government, we are not using megaphone politics. I think there have been a lot of representations which have been made, and I think in the fullness of time, I think the issue will be addressed. For example, let me tell you.
He's just problematic, isn't he? That's the real issue, that Miguna is not the kind of individual that any party can contain or control.
In fact, you should come back and, all this hullabaloo is pure nonsense, if I may put it that way. And a lot of things happen to all of us. Like, for example,
you think
during the resist movement, the British government actually cancelled my visa, and had to take steps towards making sure that
the British government cancelled your visa?
Yeah, cancelled my visa. I could not travel to the UK, and they didn't just cancel; they wrote to me. Yeah, and I didn't announce it to the world that they have cancelled my visa. The United States government also, through their representatives.
You're saying he should suffer in silence?
No, I'm not saying he should suffer in silence, but toughen. And there are many ways. There are many ways that issue can be resolved. And I can tell you, it's been 1 year. Any one day that Miguna is out there is not justifiable. But it's not that from where we sit, we don't do anything or we don't say anything.
Okay.
And if we were not doing it, if we were elected not to do anything about it, I would not have gone to court myself.
Okay. You threatened to impeach the deputy president under Article 154, gross misconduct. Why have you not pursued that if you still hold it to be true?
Well, in the United States, there are plans to impeach President Trump.
What about in Kenya?
And it's taking a bit of a while. Yeah, the fact that I've gone slow on it does not mean that I'm completely quiet and it'll never come again, because impeachment is a political process.
So those plans are still there?
So I'm not saying that the plans are not there. I'm not saying that I've retreated, but I've said he has committed some acts which are impeachable in accordance with our constitution. What
about President Kenyatta? In 2015, you believed he too had done the same thing over not paying teachers, violating court orders, and defending Anne Waiguru over corruption allegations at NYS. Do you think, would the same answer apply, that you have not said you have stopped it entirely?
Yes, impeachment normally is a last resort. In the whole history of the United States of America, there have only been 2 impeachments: Andrew Johnson and President Clinton, because I think Nixon resigned before the process was undertaken. So it's not something that you want to use every time, but it is always important to remind those who exercise authority on our behalf that if you persist, if you continue, the tool is always there. And we used it against Moi, although at that time it was not impeachment.
Some would say this is just hypocrisy and political convenience. Now you're in a handshake, all's forgotten.
It's not. I think from where I sit, and I think my history is very clear, when I was bringing a motion on no confidence on President Moi, the state was more powerful. The state had more tools to intimidate people. Now there is nothing which can stop me. At the moment when I think I have prepared myself well enough and done the political work that is necessary.
So the deputy president should watch this space. It's loading.
Well, I've never said I've withdrawn. those threats.
All right. Let's quickly just touch on corruption. You support the ongoing war on corruption, do you think? Is it above board? Is it credible?
You know, I support the war against corruption. The only thing that I said at the beginning, it tends to come in seasons. President Kenyatta, the first, had a season. President Moi had many seasons fighting against Magendo. Kibaki had his season with Anglo-leasing and all that. President Uhuru had 2 seasons. I think the war against corruption should be like a guided missile. You prepare a missile well enough that when it takes off, it doesn't miss the target. Because if it misses the target, it takes you a long time again to make the second attempt. I think some of the cases they bring into court are not well investigated. I think some of the cases they bring to court is to make it look to the country and to the people that there's a big war going on. I think it is something that should be done with the seriousness that it deserves. Otherwise, it can be counterproductive.
Sounds like you're agreeing with the deputy president that there's some playing politics going on here.
No, I'm not saying that.
It's for show.
No, it's not for show. I'm just saying that you should, the campaign should go on, but you should be conscious of the problems that also go with it. I lived in Tanzania at one time when President Nyerere had this campaign against wahujumu wa uchumi. And a lot of people were arrested. It was a very popular campaign. But after about a year, President Nyerere found out that, you know, a lot of people were being dragged into court without any proper foundation.
DCI is not doing a thorough enough job?
So I'm saying, what I'm saying, and I think I'm being very supportive, but all I'm saying is that they should do these investigations thoroughly, because when you have a good case, you can tell. And even if you have the best lawyer in the world, with a case that is well investigated and the evidence is there, you know, the only alternative most of the time is to plea bargain.
Plea bargain. Yeah. If you believe, and I imagine you do, that corruption is systemic or endemic in Kenya, what is the concrete way to fix that? Is prosecution alone enough? You know, people have talked about IFMIS almost appearing as if its sole purpose is to allow fraud of some kind to take place. You know, where do you fix it in the system?
I think the criminal justice system contributes 5% in any system in the war against corruption.
5%?
5%. The most important role that, you know, or rather the best that can be done is establishing systems that do not allow corruption.
What do you mean by that, for instance?
Yeah. For example, if you look even at the budgeting process, and I've been saying this, if you look at the budgeting process, corruption begins at the budgeting process. You know, like when they were planning these dams, already people knew there are going to be dams. Those dams are going to need land. And 20 billion shillings was going to be put in one dam, or 60 or 70 billion. So people begin working towards, you know, getting contracts right at the beginning. In fact, they sell those projects during the budget making process. So one has to watch out right from the beginning where these ideas come from. Were they originally planned for?
By the government, or was it pitched by someone else? Is that what
pitched by somebody else. I think if you go by the, you know, the financial legislation that we have at the moment, I think we've got pretty good legislation. as opposed to 5-10 years ago. But the system doesn't work because we allow it not to work. If you take somebody like the Auditor General...
It doesn't work because we allow it not to work?
Not to work. For example, the Auditor General, he started talking about, corruption, misappropriation of funds, embezzlement, long time ago. And people would not believe him. He was being castigated that he is doing somebody's political work.
He also apologized.
No, he didn't he didn't apologize. I think he was put in a situation where, he didn't want to ruffle the waters. But going back, looking back, I think he has been proven right in many ways. So what I said at the beginning about what Kibaki did, for example, when he sent away internal auditors, because you cannot spend any government money, even if there's been proper procurement, until it goes through a process of internal audit. Even in county governments, there's a process of internal audit. And the internal auditor has to make sure, was there a plan? And was the plan budgeted for? Are there funds? And has the funds been appropriated? There are a lot of questions to be asked before any payment can be made.
We are absolutely out of time.
So when you have a situation where 60 billion shillings is paid without any evidence of any work being done, it is a system then which is rotten.
Kimorer cancellation, you think that's the right decision?
I think it's the right decision, but it's like, closing the stable door when the horses are bolted. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll allow you your punchline now on any issue of national interest.
My punchline is we either believe in the rule of law and constitutionalism or we don't. If we don't, fair game, we can misgovern ourselves. But if we want to be like Singapore, here it being quoted, like Korea, I think without the rule of law and constitutionalism, Kenya will try time and again, but never really get there. And I think we are losing time. We are very well placed in the region to be a hub. Ethiopia cannot compete with Kenya. North of Johannesburg and south of Cairo, I think we got the largest possibility of rising to be a Taiwan or a Singapore. But I think the rule of law and constitutionalism is critical in that journey towards a new Kenya.
I will never refer to you by two names anymore. It shall always be James Agri, Bob Orengo.
Well, we'll talk about my names another day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
very much for joining us on Punchline. Punchline returns next Sunday on your screens. Thank you for watching. Have a fantastic week and good night and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.